Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Hot Mic Podcast. The Hot Mic Podcast is where divergent points of view debate and discuss hot topics. I'm Nate the Barbarian, your humble host, and I am not alone. Let me bring the screen off, and we can introduce our guests to everybody. If you're in the comment section, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, I'm going to just give you a heads up. I'm going to post a link that you can use to essentially call into the show. You can join the show, leave a comment using audio or video or both. And I'll share that with you. You'll see it. It'll be pinned to the top on YouTube and on Facebook in the comment sections. But good afternoon. With no further ado, there it is. There is everybody. There it is. We got Napoleon Maddox with us. What's up, Napoleon? Good to see you.
Hey, what's up? Good to see you.
Got Rebecca Simpson with us. How you doing,
I'm
Rebecca?
great. I'm happy to be back.
And Phil Hemlich is with us. How you doing, Phil?
Yeah, Mike, just to clarify, as far as the comments go, no comments critical of me will be permitted.
Oh, you like Trump. You're a dictator now, huh? Just like Trump. So thin.
If the shoe fits, wear it.
That's the charm of Trump. There's a little bit of Trump in everybody, I guess, huh?
You're always trying to stain me with that. You're always trying, just because I'm a Republican.
It is. Absolutely. I got to mess with you, yeah. But I'm just saying broader than that. I think all of us would have the power, right? If somebody says something to you crazy you didn't like, you could just send your goons after them, whatever. Yeah. We would all like that power. If we're being honest, right? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now, Kevin Aldridge, a.k.a. the voice of reason, is going to be with us in about 20 minutes. And also, contrary to the promo, Raven Mundy will not be with us. I got a last-second message. That is totally okay. And she's got stuff going on. We'll catch up with her hopefully next week. So it's just the four of us right now. And then we'll be joined by Kevin. And then Rebecca's going to be jumping off very, very soon. So let's get straight into it. So I want to get your thoughts about this. So Ohio Attorney General is calling on Ohio lawmakers to ban crowdfunding for criminal defense, right? And this all has to do with the Hinton case. And essentially, if you read this article, if not, I'll post a link for you. Let me know if you want it in the comment section. Essentially, he says that evildoers. He used that term. Evildoers should not be allowed to use these websites to crowdfund. And let's break it down. Let's ask the question. Should you be allowed to use these type of websites if you have allegedly killed a police officer? That's what it comes down to. But now you've got lawmakers in Ohio saying, yeah, we're on it. Would you support a law that banned crowdfunding for people like, Mr. like the man in Cincinnati, Hinton, in that case? This is a good idea, bad idea?
I respectfully disagree with our attorney general. I think it's a private company that's doing the crowdfunding. It's not the government that's doing the crowdfunding. Everybody has a right to a legal defense. You have a right to raise money for your legal defense. You can go out and ask your friends and neighbor verbally. Why can't you do it online? Now, if someone I was totally fine when GoFundMe took it down because that's their policy. But if you're a company that crowdfunds and that's not your policy, you're the company, you get to set your policies. I don't think the state can tell you. Now, don't get me wrong. If they allowed crowdfunding to actually break the law, I think the state could step in. So if you're going to try to pull off a heist and need to raise some money, I don't think you should be able to do that online. But, and they had information in there about, people don't necessarily know where the money is going or how they're going to spend it. I mean, buyer beware. That's true of anything when you give money online. I don't think the government needs to step in and make sure that we're not being stupid with our own money. So I think people should be able, as long as they're not crowdfunding for something that is illegal, they're not crowdfunding so that a police officer can be killed. They're crowdfunding for someone to have a legal defense, which is a constitutional right.
I'm with all of that, but the Ohio Attorney General Yost, he says that evildoers, right? That's people that do very, very bad things. Let's say we're talking about somebody that maybe had committed a crime against a child. Right?
It's until someone. I understand in this case. I don't think there's any question of whether this guy actually killed the deputy. However, they're not raising money. They're raising money for a legal defense, and he has a right to a legal defense. So just like I said, it doesn't matter to me what the crime is. I don't think we should be start making decisions about what crimes are worse than other crimes, or what murders of people are worse than other murders of people. All murders are bad. The question is, should the state step in? Is there a reason the state is stepping in? And the state is making the state would be making a moral decision about, if you commit this crime, it's not okay to crowdfund online. But if you commit this crime, it is. And that doesn't make sense. Now, like I said, I don't think you should be able to crowdfund to commit the crime, but to crowdfund to help fund your defense of yourself, I think is perfectly fine. If you have a constitutional right to it, you should be able to make money. You should be able to raise money to support having a good attorney for that constitutional right.
I think I would disagree with Rebecca in that I don't think that there is a constitutional or a legal right to raise money. And you do have a right to an adequate defense. I think if this law was to pass, it probably would be upheld, I think. But first of all, one of the things that has been pointed out is that you can't really control when that money comes into somebody, if they choose to spend it on things other than legal defense. And in fact, I think what the article I read said was that was it the wife of the guy who allegedly killed the deputy? I think they said part of it was support for, or I may be confusing him with the son, but it was part of it was support for his kids and stuff like this. So
legal defense.
Even though I agree with Rebecca,
that's all legal defense to me, right?
Not providing support for schooling or food or shelter for the kids. I mean, that's a noble and right thing, but it's not legal. It's not legal defense. Legal defense is going money to lawyers. And you can't really control what you if somebody raised it, you can't police. Well, did you spend it all for your kids? You spent all for an attorney, whatever. However, I totally agree. The word evildoers, you might say we're not evil unless we're convicted. Okay, that's if you want to use that term, or guilty. I also think it's worth pointing out that when hundreds of thousands of dollars were raised for those January 6th defendants that beat up all those cops, I didn't see Dave Yost. I didn't see him objecting to that. Okay, and that was no different from this situation. They were raising money for the families, for the defense of a group of people that had violently attacked the Capitol and injured 150 police officers.
Sorry if I misspoke or I wasn't clear, but I'm not saying you have a constitutional right to raise money. I'm saying you have a constitutional right to a defense. So you should be able to raise money to support that constitutional right, is what I was trying to say. I do think that, and maybe I misread it, but I thought that the Attorney General was quoted in the article saying, yeah, it's fine for him to raise money. It's fine for the family to raise money to support the family or the kids, but it's not okay to raise money to support the legal defense. And, he can get a public defender is essentially what they said. And I think if you want to have a private attorney, you have every right to raise money to get a private attorney.
Yeah, Nap, you want to jump in there?
I think I have a dip take, but I think the vantage point, like where I start looking at it, is a little different. I think that because as Americans, we have become very comfortable with referring to institutions that many of us trust, and that there are some of us, if we study our history, then we know that the same documents and the same tools of a democracy that work for everyone else doesn't always work for my parents, my grandparents, for me, for my nephew, for if I had a son or a daughter. Those same rules don't necessarily work for me. But yet what I owe to my fellow humans, wherever I am on the planet, or definitely to my parents and to people around me, I have a moral obligation to the way that I treat them. So where I will go with this is, the first thing that struck me is that this rebranding of morality, like this ownership of morality, of being able to say that's evil, but we're not going to call this other thing out. This long list of things, like Mr. Heimlich pointed out earlier about January 6th. So I would say, I call into question, before even thinking about the Constitution, I call into question, like, we're calling a group of people evildoers because of some fundraising, or because of, like, what exactly, like, where is the moral, like, well, I need to go back to that. That's the first step that I'm going to go to, is like, what gives you the moral high ground to be able to say, to call someone else evildoers? So that's where I would go with it.
I mean, he probably say he's the Ohio Attorney General. That's what he'll say.
Well,
I mean, he'll say that's what his job is, to call out the bad guys, to call out evil and go after it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, then we have to have a whole other conversation about the moral capacity. If we're doing that kind of moral policing, then we need to be able to go into every the personal life of every elected official and do a balance sheet. Was this moral? How many wives have you had? How many children have you fathered or mothered? How and what is your relationship with those? Like, what? Let's keep track. If we're going to keep track of a moral count, let's do it from top to bottom. It's not just good for people that don't have big bank accounts, or people that don't belong to the right demographics.
Right. There's that, but also for me, it's like, I think at a time like this, the last thing I want to see is people politicizing, even though that's what people are going to do. And this is just another example of him, sort of grandstanding for law enforcement. Like, what he should be doing is staying out of the investigation and waiting for more information to come in, like what they're telling us, the public, to do. That's what they're saying right now. Everybody's saying the same thing. Let's wait, let's wait, let's wait. And he goes off talking about evildoers, and there could be people that could be a part of a jury who are watching this. I just feel like it's improper. And again, I understand you want to show that you stand for law enforcement, but I think you can do that, but not go as far as I think Attorney General Yost did. But I get it. I get it. He's a Republican. That's what they do in these days and times. I get it. But Phil, I don't misunderstand me. I understood what you were saying in terms of defense, but that's like a classical sort of strict legal definition of it. I get it. But in all practical terms, right now, probably his legal defense is probably at the top of the list in terms of that family's financial thing that they're dealing with right now. And so any money that goes into that family, whether it's for food or whatever, that's putting on the books, and they need to lead to their lawyers or for investigators. So it's all supporting the family, right?
Yeah, but the bill he's talking about is nothing. He specifically says, I believe it's okay to raise money for the family. It's just not okay to raise it for the defense. Am I
thought it was
correct?
the
Or am I
opposite.
wrong?
I thought he was saying it was okay that there was a quote from the lawyer of the Hamilton County Sheriff Deputy that is no longer with us, and I believe the quote was something like, "Well, we all know that all this money isn't going to just the legal defense." As if, yeah,
Well, that's
as if
what I'm
some money is
saying.
going
Is
to
I
food or whatever.
well,
But I don't have a problem with that. So what? If people want to donate money,
well,
they don't
let,
care exactly where they know where it's going. It's going to support that family.
So here's what he says. This is two separate cases, Yost said. If there's a website, if there's a funding page for him to help with his funeral expenses, to help his family, that's a different kind of thing than what we're talking about here today. Why all of us are here is because his father used his motor vehicle as a deadly weapon and killed a man who had nothing to do with this. So what I think Yost is saying there is it's okay to raise money for the family, for the funeral expenses, that kind of thing, to help the family, but it's not okay to raise money for the funeral expenses. But my point is,
You know, you mean
Sorry,
for
for the lawyer. Yes, thank you. I
lawyer,
misspoke.
Rebecca.
But I disagree with. I don't think government should be in the position of making those decisions. They're not raising money to do anything illegal, and I would see why government would step in there. But otherwise, people should get to choose what they want to fund. The government shouldn't say what you're allowed to fund and what you're not, as long as it's not something illegal.
Well, you can't fund for terrorist
Terrorist
activities and
activities
things
are
like
illegal,
that.
Phil.
But
That's what I just said. If you were raising money,
yeah, so I mean, you can't fund
but you
for
could
something
raise
that's illegal.
but
Yeah.
you could
This
raise money
people-
probably to fund the defense of someone who's been accused of terrorism, which is different. I agree with you.
Yeah, without
Yeah, you
breaking the
can't
law.
raise money to do something illegal.
This is super interesting to realize that a part of the platform that got us here is that the government is too big and government is overreaching and government should stay out of the lives of individuals. Government should stay out of the lives of citizens. On the individual level, or that government has its place and government is too big. But since the victory of the people that have been saying that, have used this as a part of their platform, all I see is an explosion of government where it reaches over into all kinds of other areas that, like Ms. Simpson just said, it shouldn't be the role, it shouldn't be the territory or the jurisdiction to be able to reach over here and say, oh, I don't like that, how that looks. Like, stay in your lane, as we say.
Yeah, well, one of the hypocrisies of people in my party is that we're supposed to believe in like limited government and decentralized government, but when it helps a politician to score points to do something that's just the opposite, they go ahead and do it. And example is DeSantis down in Florida, who, instead of allowing local school boards to decide what books kids can read, what's in the library, they mandated you can't have anything about DEI, you can't have anything that deals with racial issues and stuff, which to me is not only horrible as far as free speech goes, but it's totally kind of like Napoleon said, it's totally contrary to what we're supposed to believe, which is we're not supposed to have top down government. But basically, unfortunately, politicians, and I throw Yost in this, they're just doing a base play. They don't care whether it goes against our so-called principles. I think I should also say, though, in fairness, that uh, I would say if somebody raised money, let's say for the criminal defense of, let's say, the guy who allegedly killed the police officer, and they passed this law and you couldn't do that, I think you would have a decent issue to raise in court. Not that you have a right per se to raise money, but if you could show that I needed or he needed that money for his legal defense, I think you might have an ability.
I'm also wondering if it would be
law.
a free speech issue as well, because you have a right to support things that you want to support.
It seems to me that it's directly a free speech issue, because ultimately, when we say freedom of speech, it's not just about the words coming out of your mouth. It's also about freedom of thought. And if you can control what somebody can say, if you can control what somebody can read, then who's to say, I mean, with the technology that we have that's increasingly available, where does that really stop? Like, when you can figure out, with the algorithms can figure out what you're buying and what you're shopping for and what you're watching online, like we're really talking about freedom of thought. You can't support certain things because we don't agree with that principle. So I don't know what part of America we think is going to be left if this trend continues.
Not only that, I don't know how Ohio thinks it's going to regulate what a company online does. Ohio doesn't regulate the internet. I don't. You just make it illegal in Ohio. It doesn't even make sense.
Well,
all right. Appreciate the on. Let me see if I can get this. Yeah. So speaking of control, Trump's that. I mean, here we are for the last, I don't know, 3 weeks on some levels. There's been an ongoing conversation about bill, right? Of all the Republicans.
You're kind of fading.
Hear me now? How about that?
Yeah, I guess so. I was having a little trouble hearing you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So where was I? So, I mean, including Trump's big, beautiful bill, and it's got a lot of stuff in it that people are saying nasty. It's going to have a really nasty effect on citizens. But you had 2 Republican holdouts. And then I read that Trump wants to primary them. He's calling them out by name. And I thought, wow, I mean, this really speaks to the control that the Republican Party has. But I'm also, I mean, how you classify yourself, or I don't know.
No, I mean, I vote both ways. It depends on how, but I'm probably more of a libertarian. I definitely am right of center.
All right. Did you vote for Trump?
I did. I don't like Trump, but I didn't want to.
Rebecca, our children look up to you.
I did vote for Trump, but it's only because the inflation over the last many years, as well as Kamala's belief that we can. I also have a background in accounting, and she wanted to tax unrealized gains, which is crazy. So there were just a lot of things that Democrats wanted to do that I didn't like. But no, I'm not a Trump fan. But I generally prefer more conservative policies, and definitely.
Yeah, she's not a Hitler fan, but she thinks like Mark Shot.
Well, I also believed. I'm glad that one of the other topics that's going to come up, and I don't know if I'll be here for it or not, but I was glad that you have the topic on there of contempt of court, because I was not afraid like Phil was, because we argue about this in our family with our kids, because he's sort of turned my son, but I think my daughter is still a little bit with me, but
not for long.
Anyway, I trust the system that we have put in place under the Constitution, that we have separation of powers, and that there are checks and balances. And as long as that is respected, I don't think Trump can become a dictator. And
I'll tell you how he can.
The first thing that happened when he got in office and started doing all this was there were a lot of lawsuits filed. And as long as the administration follows what the courts are saying, then I'm fine with it.
Yeah, as long as they follow. That's the key words there. As long as they follow.
And even on, and I'm sorry, I've gone off the other topic now, but even on the one where it talks about we need the courts to enforce contempt. I mean, there were no mention of the cases. Now, I know there was the one of the plane taken off to take the people who were alleged terrorists out of the country, and there's a question there.
And they disregarded the court's order.
Yes, that sounds like it could have been contempt in that case. But I am not aware of other cases where there was potential contempt. And yes, if that is true, that very much concerns me.
Well, let me just point out, as we've discussed before, something about our federal court system. They have no army, okay? There has been an unwritten rule since Marbury versus Madison that if a court or the court rules, we obey it, but it is voluntary. And what we're seeing here with the Trump administration is we're just seeing the beginning of the unraveling. They refuse, even though the Supreme Court told them to bring back this guy Garcia. It's been a month, they haven't done it. Similarly with some other.
I think that's why they took it off.
Well, I would strongly disagree with that. But let's put it this way: whether that's correct or not, my prediction is, especially after the midterms, I think you're going to see Trump basically say, "Screw it, we don't have to obey the courts." I think that's what you're going to see.
In the midterms that they so what should be happening now, right? Too, because a lot of the things that Trump is doing, Congress should be overruling him, because Congress should be the one that does it, not him.
But he doesn't have to pay attention to Congress.
My point is, Congress isn't even trying, because they're just kowtowing to him. So I'm hoping in the midterms they get voted out.
Okay, so
doesn't matter. It won't change anything.
So I'm just meeting you today. Well, actually, both of you. I know of Mr. Hemlich and Miss Simpson. I'm just meeting you today. So I'm actually excited to be able to ask a person that can actually respond to this question. So you.
Me too. What about
me? He may be talking about you, but probably
no. You weren't.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I didn't understand.
No, because you weren't. You didn't. There were several things you haven't said yet. Maybe you're going to say some things, and I'm going to be like, "Okay, this is a scientific experiment." Okay, so my question then is, so you said, Ms. Simpson, you said that you trust the judicial system, like basically the system that we have in
Not
place under the
judicial.
Constitution.
I trust the
Legislative,
we
or
have 3 branches of government under the Constitution. We have Congress, we
yes,
have the administration, and we have the courts. And they're supposed to have checks and
yes,
balances on each other under the Constitution. That's
right,
I trust that.
right. Oh,
But they
okay.
don't.
So, and that's interesting to me, that because I hear and I have heard all my life people referring to the Constitution as if it can do something by itself. Like if the Constitution were like air or water, like water has a universal effect. If water arrives in a certain, it is a chemical reality. You can't, it doesn't mix with oil. You know, we can't breathe it in as humans. Water is a certain thing. The Constitution only functions based on what humans do with the Constitution. And clearly, right now, when you say that you trust the government that we have, that the United States has in place, it's really blurry to see what
She's saying she trusts the system.
Right.
Not
So
this
what I'm
particular
saying to you is
government.
I do trust the system, and I think the system will eventually work itself out, because so far there is that one case where I think the administration may have been guilty of contempt of court,
There's
which
a
is
few
very
others. There's a few
concerning.
others they
But the
haven't
checks
obeyed.
and balance on that is you also have Congress, who should be passing things, getting
Okay, so what could Congress do? They pass a law
no.
and Trump ignores it. What happens? Well, the courts have to enforce it. He can ignore Congress even if the
Okay,
Democrats
Phil, let me
control
finish.
Congress.
So right now, that old law that he's relying on to get people out of the country, they could rescind that law. They haven't even tried to do it, and they're not going to, because they have no guts at this point to overrule anything that he's doing. It's all party politics, it seems to be, at this point, other than going back to the topic we're supposed to be discussing, Warren Davidson and Massey, who actually
It's all
stood up
together,
to
though.
him on something. However, the other thing is, at the midterms, there will be an opportunity for people to vote these Republicans out. And then I actually believe it's dangerous to have Republicans in all branches of government. I just think that's dangerous. And so
We
the
agree
checks
on
and
that.
balances, and not only that, you can, I mean, I know he's already been impeached, but you can impeach him and actually have the trial and actually get him out. But that requires that the Senate have some chutzpah, I mean, that the Senate actually do that.
well, so let's put it this way. You said when you first started on this segment of the discussion, you said that you voted for Trump because of some things you didn't like that the Democrats were, that basically you talked about inflation very, very briefly.
Yeah.
And you talked about something about I don't remember what the other point was, but basically what I'm gathering is that because of your values, you decided to vote for Trump. So if you were in any of these branches of government that should be checking him to in accordance with the order of the government that you believe in, the structure of the US government, the branches of government that you believe in that are supposed to work as checks and balances, would you, Ms. Simpson, would you be one of those people that would stand against Trump? Because right now, knowing all that we had some signs, we had some flags before he got in. But you said, well, but all of that is not bad enough for me to my values about the inflation and something else that you said that Miss Harris, Kamala Harris, didn't. So it makes me wonder if you were in, Congress or Senate, like if you would actually check him as he should be checked.
I would be in the minority, just like Massey and Warren Davidson were. But I voted for Trump because I generally fall on the more fiscally conservative side. And I didn't.
Do you feel that? Do you see? Are you happy with the results of your
No, and that's what I was about to say to you. Trump was in office before for 4 years and did not do crazy stuff like this, right? Now he's in office. And so I didn't anticipate that he was going to do crazy stuff like this. I thought he was just saying things to say them. I was wrong. I will admit I was wrong. Now, some of the things that he's doing. So
Tell our daughter that, will you please?
Some
So she
of
doesn't
the
get off
things
course.
that he's doing. So, for example, I understand the concept of why I think anything that he does that is like this idea that people who are born, that babies that are born in America are not U.S. citizens, is absolutely ridiculous, and it is shocking to me that he's saying that. Although when it comes to his tariffs on some things, I get the concept of we have gotten completely out of whack in the United States, whereas we don't make anything anymore. And one of the reasons we don't make anything anymore is because we have labor that's so inexpensive and is exploited in other countries, and they ship in products that are really cheap, and we like cheap products. So to make a sea change, to make a real change, you're going to have to do something drastic. So I get the concept of why he's doing the tariffs. Now, these other things.
It sounds like you would be the kind of person, if you were in Washington or if you were in proximity of the current president, you would ask him, well, with all of these tariffs, Mr. President, why did you get your Bibles and your ties and all of these things made in China?
Yeah. That's a great question.
I mean, if you want to spend time listing the hypocrisies of Donald Trump, this is only like a 2-hour show. We don't have time. There's not even any point to it.
No, I did not. I didn't vote for Trump because I like Trump. I voted for Trump because I'm more fiscally conservative, and I had no idea he was going to like sort of go off the rails like he has.
Well, he hasn't gone off his rails. These are the same rails that he's already been on for.
Right, but he did not do that the first 4 years.
No, but what I'm saying is that there is plenty of evidence according to looking at the ways that he runs his business, that he has ran his businesses, and the way he runs his life, that it's not like it's like we see a storm cloud coming and now it's lightning and thundering and we're like, well, where did this come from?
Well, the real problem
it's hard to take that seriously.
The real problem that I see is that we just don't have anyone who'll stand up to him. What we have now are Republicans in Congress that just absolutely positively will not stand up to him. So
I have a hard time believing that you would have stood up to him, because there were a lot of people that were standing up to him before, and when they saw him gaining power and traction with his charisma, they got in line. Most of the people, the people that are with him now were people that were once against him.
I mean,
and so it's hard for me to buy it.
I've never once said a supportive statement of Trump. I mean, you asked me if I voted for him, and I did, and I explained why. I have never been a Trump supporter.
Yeah, I just, Trump, when I hear people say, and again, I think, I don't want to argue why you voted for Trump. That's your personal business. But, how do you call yourself a fiscal conservative? And that's the reason why you voted for Trump, when we all know that 25% of our national deficit was incurred under Trump because of his crazy tax policies, right? Letting rich people off the hook. So if you're fiscally conservative and the core of that is our national debt, how do you support a man that put 25% more on the national debt? That is, I don't understand.
I don't know the statistics of who put what on the debt. So I'll just have to trust you on that. But what I'll tell you is things like, all of this forgiveness, taxpayers forgive, all the forgiveness of debt of student loans. I completely agreed with that. Like, I paid off my student loans. Why am I now?
You completely agree or disagree with that?
Student loans, And so I'm just saying that
you saying you agree or disagree with it, Rebecca? I'm sorry.
Disagree with what?
Keep missing it with student loans.
I disagree with forgiveness of student loans. There are a lot of policies that the Democrats did that what?
How can I disagree with that?
Go to school.
Nathan, we've been through this issue over and over.
To go to school. You sign there and say, I'm going to pay it back. And you don't have any intention of doing that. When I came out of school, I was $100,000 in debt. Over many years, I paid off my student debt, and I worked at big law firms the people were great, but that's not what I wanted to do when I got out of law school, but I did it to pay off my debt. Now they've forgiven people's debts who said they were going to pay. I mean, it doesn't teach people responsibility. B, you have people like me who paid off my student debt now paying taxes to pay off other people's student debt. It doesn't make any sense.
We're kind of getting off track here. If I could jump back to the Massey Davidson, that whole issue, if you guys don't mind.
Yeah, no, but I'm okay with us off track because I haven't had this conversation with Rebecca.
Well, what are you, the host of the show or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so that's just
I
interesting. And
okay.
Phil kind of made this argument. I think Kevin and everybody, I think, disagreed with me that day. But for me, there are some things that we have to look at that are bigger than ourselves. Like we have a society where it's all about me, and I. It's so selfish, and that's part of the problem with this messed up world. But when it comes to these student loans, I mean, I get it. In a world in which we bailed out the credit card industry and we bailed out the big banks and we have bailed out other countries, I have no problem with bailing out working class people that decided to invest in themselves by going to college so they can be productive tax-paying members of our
I don't
society.
think you can
How,
compare.
how could you
It's super
ever
I
have
think
a
I should
problem with
point
that?
out, by the way, that Nathan is the local president of the Bernie Sanders fan club.
I
I
don't
just
think
want to
you
get
can.
that out there.
I don't think you can. I think
Just
you'd have to
full
look at all those
disclosure.
things separately. I'm looking at student loans. I just think that when people take out a loan and they agree to pay back that loan, they should pay back that loan. It's a personal responsibility as far as I'm concerned. If you're not going to pay it back and you don't
But I
intend
also
to,
think
I mean,
that
don't get me wrong. If something happens and you
Well,
become,
I mean, that's going a little bit say that when people take out a loan to go to school, and then they go to school for 4, 8, or 12 years, however long their loan is, or however long they stay in their undergraduate or graduate program, that when they take out the loan, they know they're not going to pay it back. That's a little
no, I'm not
hard.
saying that. What I'm saying is,
But
if you
that's
take
what
out
you
a
said.
loan,
That's
it's
what you
and
said.
it's one of the issues that we have in our society, frankly, these days, is people don't have personal responsibility, and this is it's a whole.
And do you think the current government, the current affairs of what the world that we live in, do you think it's helping people to be more responsible for what they say out of their face?
I don't understand your question.
My question is, you're saying that right now in this world, people don't have, or in this country, people don't have responsibility.
Not saying all. I'm just saying that there is this concept
Right.
of
I get it. And what I'm saying is that I find it really interesting that with the things that everything that you said thus far about why you voted for who you voted for, now you're saying that you find it like there's a problem with a lot of people that don't take responsibility for themselves, for their actions, for what they commit to, for what they say. And I'm asking you the question, do you think that the current political climate and the current leadership is helping people to be more responsible?
right? As I explained to you a moment ago, I voted for Trump not because I like Trump, and I don't agree with most of the things Trump is doing right now. However, the reason I voted for him because in general, conservatives are more personal responsibility is more a core belief of conservatives generally. And that, if you have a debt, you pay it. If you're responsible for something, you do it. You have a job, and the concept that, we're letting all these rich people off. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think that rich people should pay taxes. There is a huge portion of people, if you look at our tax system now, that don't pay any taxes at all, that are lower down. Okay. And the fact is, the people who are making, a lot of them are employers. Those are the people that are employing people and paying them so that then they can pay their taxes.
Please allow me the
Yeah.
chance to reintroduce myself. My name is Napoleon Maddox. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. My parents met each other in Springfield, Massachusetts. My mother is from South Carolina, from an agricultural family in South Carolina. My father was from an agricultural family in Georgia. So our sense of responsibility and the way that we were brought up in Cincinnati and the ways that we connect to our families in Springfield and in the South is that not only are we responsible for ourselves, but the way that we show up and show responsibility to ourselves is that we are responsible for our family, for our village, for our city, for our state, for our country, for the world. So this idea of personal responsibility is about rugged individualism and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps.
No, I don't agree with you on that.
I'm just making sure that you understand.
No, you and I have
when you say that conservatives believe in personal responsibility, I want to make it clear to you that if you think that that's unique to your party and to your politics, I'm here to introduce you to the other
I
side
think you
of the
just made a
reality.
good point. It's not a question of whether everybody believes in personal responsibility or responsibility to their community. It's a question of how do you get there, right? So I completely agree with you. The values that you just discussed are the values that I'm talking about, and I think the values of your family that you just discussed are amazing and wonderful. The way and they're the same values that I would say that I have and that my family has, but the way
Well, could you go back and tell
you
all of your
accomplish it
Republican
is
friends
different.
that
You don't accomplish it through the government. It's not the government's job to do that. It's individuals' job to support their
It's
friends
both.
and their families and their neighbors.
It's
It's
both.
not the government's job to
It's
do
both. It's
where,
certainly
where
the
does the
government's job.
government get the resources that it uses? How do you think the government has a salary?
that. They get it through taxes.
That's our
My
money. The government is paid
point,
because of
though,
our
is
money.
government should be limited and should have very specific things that it does. And paying
For
off
everything that the
people's
government, for
debts.
everything that, for
The
every time
government
the
was
government,
not created to support people.
Absolutely, it was. That's why it was created by people.
for the
Yeah,
people, by the
absolutely.
people is what the
But
Constitution
here,
says.
listen. But here's
That's
the
what
other
it's
reason
saying.
why we got to keep it in mind. It's an issue of fairness, like I said, and these are all facts. Anybody can look it up. This government, our federal government, via our tax dollars, bailed out big banks because we said they were too big to fail. And we have bailed out the auto industry in doing that. And we have bailed out a lot of businesses over the years. And so if you have people who met the criteria, which was, correct me if I'm wrong, these are people who were paying their loans and were up to date and have been doing so for, I think the limit was like 10 years or something like that, going back to Biden's plan. If those people qualify for the government to come in and say, listen, we're going to help take your debt away, that is good for all of us, because
I don't
now
see how
these
it's good
people,
for the people whose debt gets taken away. I mean, in the case of
it's
the
good
banks,
for
if
everybody,
the
Rebecca,
banks
and let
had
me explain
failed,
how.
the banks have our money. If the banks had failed, that would have been a financial crisis for the entire country and potentially the
So we agree. So we agree then
student
that
debt is not
federal
an
taxpayers,
issue that could impact the economy of the entire world. Okay.
exactly. So
So
we agree
Nathan,
then. So
I
we agree.
apologize, but I was going to be on only until 2. So I
I
have to
understand.
ask this. We
But
have to
we
put
agree,
all this back
Rebecca. The federal
together so that we
government,
can continue
it
this
did bail
conversation.
You
out
guys
the
have
big
driven
banks.
her off
No,
this show.
We agree.
I stayed
We
11
agree.
minutes
The
later
federal
than I was going
government,
to, but I do want to continue
yeah, I
it. So
appreciate
you
you.
have to promise to have me back so we
Absolutely. I'm going to
can.
continue.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank
All
you for
right.
your
Thanks.
time.
Bye.
But Rebecca and I were agreeing that the federal government has bailed out the big banks, right? Because we said they were too big to fail. We have bailed out the auto industry because we said they were too big to fail. Well, I will say that the people are too big to fail as well. And so under Biden's plan, if you had people who were up to date in their payments, these were people who were not in default in most cases. These are people who were paying their payments, in many cases up to 10 years. If they get that the rest of their debt taken off the table, that is good for all of us. You know why? Because those people are going to go out and use that extra money with small businesses. They're going to use it buying local products, and then support those businesses that support so many other people. When the money goes straight to the private equity firms and the banks, it never trickles down back to the people. That's the other reason why the government did it, because the government is looking for the greater good. And yeah, some people may not understand it, but sometimes things are like that. It's like I have nothing else to say on this.
Well, no, I mean, if you want to get back in the student loan debate that we went through a couple weeks ago, I'll give it to you right now from my perspective. I think it's a horrible thing that kids or adults actually have 100,000 plus of student debt, and it's a horrible thing. And frankly, that relatively small amount, 10,000 or something, wasn't going to help that much. I said before, the way you stop this from happening is you allow student debt to be discharged in bankruptcy like every other debt. That prevents people from being enslaved to these lenders and to the federal government forever. It's a right that anybody who owes money to anybody in this country has for almost any reason except student debt. That is the injustice. And as I've said before, because these companies know, and the government knows, that they've got this grip on these people for the rest of their lives, they in the colleges too, they give them all the loans they want because they can go after them forever. So if you allow it to be discharged in bankruptcy, you put the risk on the people loaning the money, not the people borrowing the money. And that will be a very significant and positive change. I also said that, and I do believe this, the government should simply get out of the student loan business, because it is the government guarantee, again, that gives these companies the incentive to say, hey, the government's going to bail me out. I'll loan as much money to these kids as I want to. So I believe let it be discharged in bankruptcy, and just don't let the government get involved. My opinion.
Yeah, I know, man. You Republican types just believe that the government should do nothing. It makes no sense to
Yeah.
me whatsoever.
Well, we Republicans, I don't hear any other Republicans, or frankly, any Democrats, doing the right thing on that bankruptcy issue. Probably because they all get campaign contributions from the big banks.
Yeah, but
that loan the money.
philosophically, it seems like Republicans at the core, you all believe that we should have no federal government. And I'm like, how does that benefit people? I just don't understand political philosophies
Well, first of all, it would be,
that are
even
not
as I used with
based
my
on
example about
helping people with real life issues.
See, you're arguing with our so-called philosophy that we don't follow. Okay, I mentioned about DeSantis and all these governors passing laws controlling library books. I mean, if we believe in limited government, how can you do that? And if I can, just since we're talking about it, get back to that issue about the budget. The ironic thing is, those two congressmen, none of whom I've really respected before, but now I do have some respect. I ran against Davidson a couple of years ago. In fact, I give those guys credit, because here's the funny thing. These guys were actually standing up for what we Republicans and conservatives are supposed to believe, which is you pay off your debts. You don't pass them on to the kids and grandkids. Okay, so I give them credit. And the reason Trump wants to primary them is because they are the true Republicans. If they actually believe in, or at least in this case, believe in what the conservatives and Republicans are supposed to believe. And because of that, he's primarying them. The people that go against what I believe is true conservatism are all those Republicans that voted for this, because just the total national debt now is over $36 trillion. Okay. This bill is going to add $3.8 trillion to the national debt. So the national debt is now going to go up to $40 trillion. So what about all the people in my party that were attacking Obama and Biden and so forth for passing on debt to future generations? We're hypocrites. And Donald Trump I think your 25% figure is a little bit high, but in either case, he added more debt in 4 years to this country than any president in history.
We got Kevin Aldridge with us. What's up, Kevin? You on the golf course, man?
Yeah, man, I'm down here in Myrtle Beach, man. I just got done playing badly.
Nice.
This is
as
how the
bad
other
as
half
some of
lives,
Phil's-
right here.
As some of Phil's takes are on Hot Mic, man. That's about how bad I played today. It's a beautiful day, though. Beautiful day.
Hey.
Well, when I saw you in that outfit, you look like what in the 60s they used to call beatnik. You got the hat and the shades. But by the way,
it, man.
I don't want to hear any more of your comments about me being some kind of well-to-do elitist. I mean, here I am struggling, working hard here, and you're down there just living the good life. So I don't want to hear any more about this class warfare stuff anymore.
So I have a quick question. I'm wondering, how far back does this idea of that you just shared, Mr. Hemlich, about not passing on debt from generation to generation? How long have Republicans
for government?
Yeah. How long has it been Republican policy or Republican idealism or ideology that government should not pass debt from generation to generation? How long has that been?
It's been a long time. Prior to Ronald Reagan, who started that ridiculous supply side economics thing, which never turned out to be true. Before him, if you go back, and I'm dating myself here, sort of the Eisenhower, all back, if you, or even 60s, 70s congressional Republicans, to be a fiscal conservative meant that you pay your bills. You don't spend more. money, then you
understand what
take
it
it.
means.
However,
I understand what it means. I'm wondering how far back does it go? Like, does it
I'm
go?
telling you,
That
it.
concept makes
Well, I'm
that
telling
makes
you,
no
it
sense. You don't spend more money than you
we
bring
lived
in.
up to it. Excuse me. We lived up to it until Nixon and Johnson, okay, they wanted to both pay for social stuff and pay for the war in Vietnam. So Nixon did the worst fiscal thing that's been done in our history, which is to get us off the gold standard, which basically allows us to print money as much as we want. Okay. From that point on, I'll be on, from that point on, the Republican Party, they've been what I call fiscal phonies. And the only president in the last, 30 or 40 years to balance the budget was Bill Clinton. I give him a lot of credit for that, which is why I think he was a great president.
Okay, so I'll ask the question in a different way. Does that philosophy, does that ideal go back to Grant?
Ulysses Grant?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know that, but I know that it was traditionally the Republican Party back then. The party of Lincoln is nothing like obviously it is now, or even it was in the 60s, 70s. But I would just say traditionally, I'm talking the last 40 years, 50 years, or maybe go say 20th century. Being a fiscal conservative meant you have a balanced budget. But what happened starting with Reagan is people decided, well, I don't really want to pay our bills, so let's print the money or borrow the money and pass it on to future generations. And now what's happened? We're now over $36 trillion.
I'm trying to figure out if we can identify the first fiscally conservative Republican or just person that identified as fiscally conservative. That's what in the government.
I mean, no. They all identify as fiscally conservative.
And it's all a
that
lie.
means nothing. Okay.
Okay. Well,
it's all a lie.
Then we can just stop talking about it if it doesn't mean anything, because I think that's with the bankruptcy. The bankruptcy.
Let me give an example of a guy.
I think that we're reaching a point of bankruptcy of like when people talk, it doesn't mean anything. I don't mean bankruptcy in terms of financial capital. Yeah. I think that the word of a person, and that's what is really.
Well, we're reaching the point of financial bankruptcy.
I have to really say that's what it becomes offensive when people like our previous guests, with all due respect, when it's kind of saying it without saying it. We call that in people that I hang out with, we call that sneak dissing. When you say something and it's supposed to mean one thing, but you know that it really also means like you people are actually lazy and you don't pay your debts because you don't want to work. So what we're getting to, the world that
I would say the people that are lazy are the people in Congress that pass these deficits every year.
Okay, so let's go a step further. Because we keep using this term fiscally conservative Republicans, and because we know that there's a certain party of people, and I'm not letting anybody else off the hook because I have a bunch of problems with the so-called Democrats as well. But since we're on the topic of fiscal conservatism and paying debts as they come due, the United States government has a great debt that it has never even talked about paying. At least two.
Talk about a financial debt or both. A moral debt?
But first of all, a financial debt debt that is linked directly to a moral debt. And this is why I wanted to know who identifies as
a which debt are you talking about? Our deficit, our current national debt, or some other kind of debt?
No, why we can't put air quotes around debt. When we can scientifically say and go back and find enough evidence and research to say that the United States would not exist without the work and the labor of and the social, political, and labor contributions of African descendants that was never compensated, whereas Japanese people were given reparations, and now this current president is welcoming people.
I'm sorry, were they given reparations for the internments? Is that what you're saying? Is that true? You're talking about the World War II internment? I'm just curious.
What
you're referring to?
So if I have to.
Sounds like you're getting to a reparations
issue. It's not even at this point. I mean, we could call it a reparations issue, but it's a debt. I mean, if we just talk about talk about 40 acres and a mule, where it was promised and reneged on. 40 acres and a mule was promised.
Well, how about the millions we killed millions of Native Americans?
The land and the what was given, it was allocated, and then somebody said, "Oh, you know what? we shouldn't make these white farmers suffer like that. We have to take that land back from the black people. They reneged.
No
They
doubt.
reneged.
No doubt.
And that was never handled. That was
Right.
never taken care of. So before I hear another conversation about fiscal conservatism and being responsible for debts that have to be paid, I need some debts paid back to people that worked their whole life.
Well, let's put it this way. I agree with
I'm with you 1,000%.
about the, let's say we might call it moral
It's not
debt.
a moral
and, I mean,
debt.
we could
It's
say the
more.
same
It's a
thing for
concrete
Native-
financial debt.
Well,
Yes, it
that's
is,
not
because
a
America
concrete
would not
financial debt.
exist
It's a
today
moral
without
debt.
our work.
It
matters,
doesn't matter.
bro.
I mean,
It
what
matters.
about Native Americans? We killed millions of Native Americans. You could say the same thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And
All right.
I
So
say
I
the
guess
same thing for them too.
Okay. I don't deny the horrific treatment of African Americans, Native Americans, and I could probably list a whole bunch of others. Okay, though those are the most horrific. But what I am saying is that in terms of the future for, say, those of us who have kids, our kids or the next generation, all right? What is going to doom that next generation, and maybe even us as well, is the fact that we owe over $36 trillion and we can't repay it. And ultimately, what that is going to mean, as it did in Germany after World War I, is we're going to start continuing to print and borrow money. The dollar is going to sink, and you and I are going to have to pay $20 or $30 for a bar of soap. That is I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying, but that is the most immediate fiscal catastrophe that we're facing. And this budget they just passed just makes it worse.
I'm glad you said
Conversation
that.
via politics. It certainly is, because Republicans and even Democrats will always be able to turn to the debt as a reason why they don't want to pay that original debt that they owe to our ancestors. So, when you hear, and you already know this, Napoleon, I don't need to say it, but I'm just going to say it for the point of the show. But you and I both know, bro, when they're talking about fiscal responsibility, they're not talking about reparations. They are not talking about no reparations.
Well, but let me just say also, it isn't. I mean, you could also say the same thing, and I would say the same thing, that all that in this particular budget, okay, if you took away renewing the Trump tax cuts, you probably might get relatively close to a balanced budget. And believe me, I'm totally, I assume, in agreement with you guys that to take money from Medicaid and throw 8 million people, as they will, off Medicaid, and then basically pass massive tax cuts. Well, you can say, yeah, they'll use that as an excuse to not to pay reparations, but they're also using it as an actual excuse right now to pull people off Medicaid.
And that's the
Millions of people.
disingenuousness of the Republican Party, Phil, that I've talked about many times.
I don't disagree. I
You
don't
have to say
disagree.
that the Democrat Party is perfect in any way, because anything run by people could ever be, and we've seen them fail, us in particular, many times. However, the Republicans' plan is nefarious, and I would call it evil, right? Where, essentially, they say one thing, but in actuality, it's all about power. I mean, just think about it. They want to be able to be in your bedroom. They want to be in the doctor's office with a woman. They now want to be in our colleges and universities in terms of curriculum. They want to tell you what you can read, what you can watch. Now they want to tell you if you can crowdfund. I see one party that whenever they get a chance to be in power, they solidify power. It's not about coming up with great ideas for the people. It becomes about giveaways for their corporate donors, and then solidifying legislative power beneath themselves. And when Rebecca was on, she said something, and I understand where she was coming from, but I was trying to correct her. She said, she was talking about the members of Congress who don't stand up to Donald Trump. And she said that they're just cowards and they just won't stand up. But that tells me that she doesn't understand. The modern day Republican Party, because of the way that it's gerrymandered, you are voted to follow Donald Trump. That's what they were voted to do. People keep wondering,
I agree.
when are the Republicans going to stand up? Stand up to what? That's what they were voted to do, to follow everything and anything he says. They're never coming to push back. There is no rescue, because that's what they want to see happen. So she was talking about congressional power, and like, yeah, Congress could be saying a lot of stuff, but they're not, because they were voted to do exactly what they're
Well,
doing.
to
And that's
take it a step
following
further, I
Donald
think what
Trump's
she, no, I think
word.
Nathan, I think what she was saying was that, in 26, if the Democrats, which probably they will, just based on history, they'll take over one or more houses of Congress. Okay, and I think she was saying, oh well, separation of powers, that'll push back against Trump. But here's where I respectfully disagree with her, is if Trump is going to ignore the courts, which he's starting to do, and I believe he'll fully do it, it doesn't matter what Congress does. Because if Congress passes a law and Trump says, screw it, I'm not going to obey your law, what are you going to do? You take him to court. And if the court holds him in contempt, or the court says you can't do that, and if he chooses to ignore or just frankly disregard, disobey the courts, it doesn't matter
You
who's in
know,
Congress.
people need to understand what they're dealing with the Republican Party and Donald Trump for these next 4 years. When Rebecca was on, she was like, yeah, I think the guardrails are there, and we've got these judges, and that all looks good. And so we all understand that the federal government is going through a stress test. Will the guardrails actually hold up? But I liken it to that movie, Shawshank Redemption. Remember the movie Shawshank Redemption? You ever seen that before? You seen that?
Of course.
Right. So what we now
Yes.
know is that Andy was slowly tunneling his way to freedom. Well, in my mind, that's Donald Trump, who is slowly tunneling through the guardrails, right? The stop gaps. Um, the separation of powers have never been so thin as it is right now, and it's just a matter. It's
Yeah,
just a
I
matter
agree. I
whether
agree with you.
Donald Trump or Andy is going to escape and get through the other side before we figure them out and are able to stop them.
Like I
It's just a
said
matter.
before, the court system depends, in effect, at least the federal system, on voluntary obedience. Okay, that's what it's always defended. Even people like Richard Nixon, who were, in my humble opinion, total crooks, even he had enough respect for the court that when they said turn over the tapes, he turned them over. He didn't defy the courts. Trump is the first president to indicate he's going to do that. Like, you hear him and Vance and people say things like, well, the federal courts have no right to dictate foreign policy. That is essentially a buzzword for saying we're not going to do what they say, because they don't have the right to do this. But the way the system is supposed to work is the courts actually decide what they can do. If, for example, in these deportations, the courts decide that it is a violation of the Constitution to take somebody and send them to El Salvador without a hearing, okay, they have the constitutional right to do that. But what I think is happening, and we see it in a few of these cases involving these deportees, is that basically Trump is getting to the point where he's going to say, I don't care what you say. I don't care what the court says. They don't have a, quote, right to do this, so I'm not going to obey them.
Napoleon, have you been to South Africa? And if so, what do you think about, what's been happened here? You had the South African president who basically was confronted by Donald Trump. Donald Trump had these images alleging that, white farmers are the victims of some kind of racial comeuppance. And that's the reason why he was inviting white South Afrikaners into the country. What do you think about this?
I have not been to South Africa. Last week, however, I was in Benin, West Africa, which is quite a long ways away from South Africa. I found it interesting that people have been able to quickly identify that some of the images that Trump, the president, tried to use were images from Congo.
Right.
Benin is still few hundred miles north of Congo, so basically I have not been to South Africa. What I think about it is that it's like, it's really hard. I think this idea that, like, we're really, a lot of people are really disturbed and upset by the president, but it's just this continued allowance of his existence and his behavior. When I say his existence as president, not as a human being, but I won't let it puzzle me. because it is what it is. You know, our previous the person that was previous, the co-guest, or the other person that was on the line earlier, Miss Simpson, and then, you know, millions of Americans have built the context for him to exist, and all the things that he said and all the things that he does is just representative of, you know, Mr. Heimlich. He represents you. I know you don't like that. You don't like that idea because you're supposed to be.
I'm sorry, who represents me?
Yes.
Donald Trump?
Yes, he represents you
He represents me. How
because
so?
in
what
this
sense?
idea that the original debt and the original sin can be kicked down the road, and it's just a moral obligation. It's not clear enough to really pay back. It's not really, you know, you guys went through something, but that's, you know, that is, I agree with you, it's a problem, but that's way back there. That's the same, that allowance is what this same guy to call other human beings and places where other human beings live, to call them shithole countries, for him to then go on and lie about people that were coming from Haiti, and just the things that are not only unacceptable as a president, but unacceptable as a human being. And so so it didn't even surprise me to see the way that he lied in the face of this South African president and claimed that there was a white genocide going on. So,
right, it was all lies.
Yeah, and when I say he represents you, I know you didn't vote for him. Of course, well, you said you didn't vote for him.
I didn't. I voted for Kamala Harris.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that there is a general white allowance that some people that are not white also participated in, but it's like that's passed from generation to generation to generation.
So you're saying, as a white person, I deserve blame for Trump, who I've never voted for?
No, I'm not saying that as a white person you deserve blame for Trump exclusively. I'm saying that Trump is a symptom of American whiteness. He is a result of generations of white.
You're saying that suggests that every white person has the same point of view.
No. I'm not saying that. I think I know exactly how to articulate it now.
Okay.
Trump is the ultimate apex representation. He's an apex symptom of white male mediocrity. And because
I'm sorry, what do you mean when you say mediocrity? I hate to say this, I'm probably dumb, I don't know what that means. You don't mean mediocrity.
Mediocrity. I'm sorry, I mispronounced the word. I'm saying because he can shoot so low and get so much out of such a low shot, such a low objective. America makes him possible. The things that you allow on a daily basis. Now, I know that there are some people that are the exception that identify as you do, but I can tell by the way that you responded to me asking the questions about, well, you keep talking about financial being fiscally conservative, and I asked you since when, and you couldn't really even go back to the first fiscally conservative president.
No, I said if you go back prior to Nixon, to some extent Nixon, but prior to Nixon, being a Republican conservative meant you balance the budget, and that has changed.
But that's saying, you know, since this time, but that's not saying when was the first one. My question was, when was the first one? Because I want to.
Well, okay, I can answer that question for you. When, and I don't mean to get in the weeds here, but when prior to Nixon, we were on the gold standard, which meant, as you probably know, that if you held dollars, you could literally go to the government and they would give you an amount of gold. It was backed up. So to answer your question, but prior to getting off the gold standard, every president was required to be fiscally conservative because you couldn't print money and you couldn't borrow money like we do now. So the system prevented this horrible thing of printing and borrowing money. Basically, it applied to everyone prior to Nixon.
So here is exactly where my point is. The gold standard was respected, but not our human standard. So you had to pay back on gold, but you didn't have to pay back on what we did. You could redline us. You could do everything you needed to do for life in America to be comfortable for you and your grandparents and for people that migrated from Europe that look like you. Everything that so that you could be comfortable, that had to be respected. But our standard, the gold standard, was respected, but not our human standard. And that's what I mean when I say America made Trump possible. So I have a hard time
in so many other ways.
I mean, well, whether it
more
made
than
Trump
that's
possible, I don't disagree with what you're saying about how people of color, including Native Americans, have been basically brutalized. I don't no
But
argument
here's
there.
what, when I look at this story. So Trump invites the president of South Africa to the Oval Office, and he basically confronts him, and that's his style. Right.
He did the
Same
same thing he did with
Zelensky.
Zelensky. He
And
basically
then at some
ambushed him.
point he shows a picture or what appears to be a printout from a website or some news article that backs up his claim that white farmers are under siege in South Africa. Well, after investigations, what they found out is that the image is not even from South Africa, it's from the Congo. So it's like he's being fed this information. Some people did some more information and found out that
No, he wasn't being fed it. You don't give him credit. You
yeah, I
saying
don't know
Trump
if
was
Trump's
fed
being
it?
fed this or this is his natural
Come on, Trump did
proclivity.
this. Just so we know,
Yeah, I don't know if
remember
he's being
he
fed
did
this
the
by his
same thing.
handlers who are trying to twist him in a
That
certain
gives him
way.
too much credit. He knows what he's doing. He knows it's
Or
phony.
to your
He knows
point,
it's
he
phony.
knows it's phony. They trace back the site, and it's from some far right site that posts all kind of crazy stuff, including that the earth is flat. So it's really not a credible source. But this is the president of the United States that's confronting other heads of state with fake news. And this is becoming so commonplace that it's like we see it, react to it just when we move on. But it's just remarkable when you stop to think about it.
Well, that's what happens in dictatorships. You're being told what you see is not really what exists. Go back less than a couple weeks ago. Trump was being interviewed by a pretty ABC reporter, I think, and Trump uses this picture of Garcia that has MS-13, and the reporter says, "Oh no, that's Photoshop. That's Photoshop."
Right.
I mean, can you imagine any other? Well, just look at people who support Trump. Can you imagine throughout history anybody saying, "Oh, that's okay. He's using a Photoshop. He's lying. He's using a Photoshop picture." But are at the point now, and it's a dangerous point where even if he tells us what we see with our own eyes didn't happen, too many people go along with
he's
it.
learned a long time ago that just get the lie out there, just get the misinformation out there, and then it becomes he puts the onus on others, people like you, I, and other people out there to disprove the lie. And then once it's out there, his people are going to take it and run with whatever he says. And he's discredited traditional media so much to the point that when they come out and they say that it's a false narrative, or this is bad information that he's put out, nobody who supports him is going to believe it, because he's already cast this cloud that you can't trust traditional media sources. So he can say whatever he wants to say and allow that lie or misinformation to get out there, and then you're forced to try to disprove it, but his people aren't going to believe you anyway.
But again, to
Right.
your,
So
your
he
point,
gets
Kevin,
True.
the reason why they're not going to believe it anyway is because he's saying what people want to hear. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier, Mr. Hemlich, is that, this is not about you directly as one individual. It's about a culture, so if it were just about you, you could just go in, you could be elected, and you could go in and you could say, this is enough already. I'm Hemlich, and I declare it's enough. But it's not about you. It's about a whole culture, and ultimately, it's the people that he's saying what they want to hear. They want to hear that there's a white genocide going. It makes it they can ignore the real genocides happening.
And I would say that what got him started in his political career was basically making up this lie about Obama not being born in this country. And I agree with you, Napoleon, in that he not only spread the lie to give himself notoriety, but he knew that people did want to believe that. At least a large segment of people wanted to believe that Obama was not born in America. So he played on that lie just as he's playing on this one. I don't
Yeah, they
disagree.
they wanted to believe it because they couldn't believe that a black man got elected president in the first place. So it's easy to want to try to invalidate that in some way when you don't want it, when you got a decent swath of the country that doesn't want to accept, the results. I mean, look, I've said this for many years that Trump is an outgrowth or a rebellion of Obama's election. I mean, it began with the Tea Party, which has since transformed into what we know of as MAGA today. But all of this has been a backlash, outrage response, I think, to the election of Obama, back in 2008, and all we've seen is resistance to that change that was coming ever since then. And
No, I think it's more than that because look at the 2020 election. This is a white guy running, and nobody wanted to believe, or at least his folks didn't want to believe that he lost to this guy. Okay. So I think that's the same situation. It has nothing to do with race in that situation. It's just the fact that people don't want to. They've got to the point with this guy where they will accept what he says and they don't want to look at the facts.
Uh, all facts. All facts. All right, let me pull this up here. Coming from the Oklahoma School District. And I would say that for people to watch politics, any state that is a so called red state, meaning that they've got a legislative majority, maybe a Republican governor, House, Senate, state offices, that's a red state, as is Oklahoma. Check out what they're doing. Oklahoma is going to require schools to teach Trump's 2020 election conspiracy theories. It'll be a part of the curriculum. Students are going to be taught that something funny happened, and that's the reason why Donald Trump lost. Time. I think that if Ohio lawmakers could get it off, they would do it as well. Why? Well, because when you are in a fiefdom, when you have a king, you do everything you can to try to court that king's attention, including playing into things that he likes. He likes chocolate, you give him chocolate. He likes to hunt, you go out and hunt with him and you let him win. He likes to gamble, you gamble with him, you let him win. And he likes for people to back up his lies, you do things like this. What do you think?
Well, take it a step earlier. That's even, I think, more as bad as that is. It's more concerning, as this is the same guy who's obviously trying to get on the national attention. The head of Department of Education there. They're prior to this, they were requiring like Bible teachings in public schools. Okay, now. And I did a little podcast the other day which is a similar thing about Hegseth holding this big Christian prayer ceremony in the Pentagon. It was broadcast on all the televisions, and they sent it. By the way, they said it was voluntary, except they sent an invitation to everybody who works in the Pentagon, and you had to RSVP. Like, you got to tell us, are you coming or you're not coming? Okay, and just like the thing with the Oklahoma Bibles thing is, in my opinion, first of all, a uh, terrible uh, uh, crime against the First Amendment. It's totally contrary to the First Amendment, which basically says that the government cannot endorse any one religion. But I would also say, and Kevin may want to respond, and this is he's a little more knowledgeable on biblical stuff. I think it's actually contrary to what the Bible says. Because according to the Bible, if we are, say, to accept Christ, it is to be a voluntary thing. We are to do it not out of compulsion. Okay? And in both these situations where Hegseth holds a service like he's so moral, and Oklahoma's requiring Bible teaching in the classroom, it's both unconstitutional, it's unbiblical.
I've actually changed my stand on that. I used to have a very strong anti Bible in the classroom stance. I've changed it, Phil. Um,
How
I'm
so?
okay with it. If you want to bring the Bible into the classroom, I am okay with it. And I know people will be like, "What?" Yeah, I'm okay with it, but with one stipulation: students have to actually read it. They have to actually read it and actually read what it says about loving your neighbor and people who are different and God's mercy. Don't just have it in the room like so many people do. Actually,
Oh,
read it.
they're teaching it there. They're not just
No, no,
having the
no, no,
room; they're
no, no. Teaching.
requiring it.
I want them to actually read it. Right.
The challenge becomes how people will choose to interpret it, because that same book, people will take passages that they want to take and interpret them as I mean, they all these people, they claim to be that they're being governed by the Constitution, and they're interpreting the Constitution to make it mean what they want it to mean. So I agree that they should be reading the book, but just reading the book is not enough. If you're morally bankrupt, you can use anything and turn it into what you want it to be.
So,
All right. Is there a preacher on this podcast? Because if so, that person needs
well,
to speak up.
here's what I would say, and I say this as obviously as a pastor and someone who, certainly wants everybody to have their souls right and everything like that. I will say the reason why I would say that it's not a good idea to teach the Bible in classrooms for the same, for kind of the same reasons that was said there. But I think it's like you cannot force religion onto people. And what about students who are not Christians? So are you going to teach Islam? Are you going to teach
Right.
Hinduism? Are you going to teach, all of these other religions that are in the class? Yes, we have freedom of religion in this country, but you also have freedom from religion in this country as well. And so I think the notion of teaching Christian principles in the school and subjecting that to Jewish students or to Muslim students or to anyone who is of a different faith, or even atheist students in the classroom, I think infringes upon their rights to not have to deal with that if they don't want to. So as much as I love the Bible and Christianity, look, we live in a democratic republic, not a theocracy, right? And the founding fathers, set up our government, in a certain way for that very reason. They didn't want kings, and they didn't want, religious zealots coming in and dictating to people in the country what they should believe and what should be taught to them. So um I think for those reasons, it's a bad idea to try to bring that into the classroom. That's why we have churches. There are plenty of places where people, if you want to get that, where you can choose to go and get your education. It does not have to be, in the
Yeah.
public schools.
Pastor Eldridge,
It would cause more
I'm
problems than any
curious, and
benefit.
this is really a sincere question,
Mhm.
without any critique, but because I'm wondering, as we're talking about this, I'm wondering about, because somebody said in the comments, they said something about philosophy and religion, or I don't remember what exactly how they said it. They said, "Oh, you can teach overall theology and philosophy, but not specific to Christianity." And I think that's interesting, because there's so much
Or
to learn about
you can't
how.
promote one religion.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just reading. I'm just reading what the comment was, because I'm saying
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
saying the interesting intersection there is, there's so much development that happens even once you reach manhood, and as you mature and you reach elder status, and when you're getting toward the end of your life, there are so many changes that you go through morally and socially, and the people that you interact with. And so obviously those changes are also happening when you're in at school age, and you're growing and you're changing, you're developing. And I think that there's something that can be taught that is not towards one religion or another, but it's just about what is moral development, what is, and I don't know what that looks like. And it's interesting to me. It's interesting territory to explore as a
Sure.
theologist. If you're a theologist, I'm wondering how that could look like. What could it look like to teach this development in a classroom without
Well,
going into.
I certainly think, like, look, there is a way to teach religion in a historical context that is not about sort of sermonizing and sort of doing like evangelical work. Seminary, a lot of times when you go to seminary, a lot of that is religious studies, and so you learn the history of of the religions and the beliefs and things of that nature. So there certainly is a way to teach religion from an educational and historical standpoint. And I mean, and even if you wanted to sort of theologically or philosophically bounce around, the topics of ethics and morals and values and things of those nature. I do think there's a way that you can do it, but I often feel like the way that this is talked about in terms of doing this in schools is that it's more evangelizing versus sort of teaching, sort of like what you're suggesting, right? Like, and I think those who talk about it like that are talking about it in from the standpoint of trying to evangelize. I think that that's where it is, because people who say that, believe in their religion and think that people ought to follow that religion as well. And I think when you're crossing those lines, then I think you're getting into dangerous territory of where you're trying to dictate people's faith and what they should believe. But if you want to just teach straight, like, hey, here's the history, here are the belief systems, here's the history. Like, I think there is a way that you can do that that probably does not cross into a line of sort of proselytizing or evangelizing to folks.
So we're just kind of bringing it back. So back to this, but in Oklahoma, to require schools to teach Trump's 2020 elections, like I said, to me is two things. It's that particular lawmaker trying to curry the favor of Donald Trump. Look at me, look at me, look at what I did for you. But then secondly, I mean, there's a full on assault, in my opinion, by Republicans to control curriculums across the country. And if you think about it, it only takes about 20 years to craft the next generations of how people think. And I think there's a serious attempt by Republicans to do just that, using their control in public schools. And I think it's something people should keep their eyes on.
Ab-
Every time you see something goofy from one of these Republican led districts, it takes about maybe 1, 2, 3 years, and then it comes to Ohio over and over
it
again.
doesn't even take that long, Nathan. It takes like 1, 2, 3 months before it comes to to Ohio. I think look, I think it's interesting that they don't even want to teach authentic Black history in schools. They'll fight against that. They'll fight against having LGBTQ books in schools, but they actually want to teach conspiracy theories. Like that's the ridiculousness of what this is. Like actual histories of different groups. They don't want to teach that because it's offensive, but somehow it's not offensive to teach fake, crazy, false narratives and conspiracies in a classroom. This is ridiculous. Now, what I would say is, sure, if you are going to be talking about the history of elections, certainly the 2020 election and Donald Trump's claims are a part of the historical context, but in some way to treat them as though any of his claims were legitimate, that's what I have a problem with. And sort of that's how I had read the headline, as though you're to teach it as though there's some validity to his arguments. I think if you're going to teach it, you ought to teach that he took it to some 60 courts and was rejected by his claims were rejected by all of them. If you're going to teach that, then teach the truth of what happened in 2020. I don't have a problem with that, but I have a problem if you want to try to teach it where you're going to lend some validity to sort of his debunked claims that somehow he actually won the election. I would disagree if that's the slant that they're going to try to take in teaching it.
I wonder what happens when he teaches. Well, not when when the teachers, if they apply this curriculum and they start having this curriculum in Oklahoma, if there's some teachers that also teach all those things that you just mentioned, Pastor Eldridge, and they say, well, as a part of the curriculum, we also have to mention, by the way, that he went to these different courts and he was struck down, and it was, because if you start teaching it and you got to teach the whole thing, inevitably there's that part. So I wonder what happens when when the whole thing is taught. If those teachers will be, up for reprimand, or if they could be fired.
I'm sure Trump would. I'm sure that that's what they would want to do. That any teacher that would actually teach the truth of what happened without saying, somehow or another that these claims are valid. I'm sure that they probably would be trying to go after that teacher, just like they're going after teachers who they feel like violate these DEI anti DEI policies that they're trying to introduce now. And so again, this is just more of, that group's efforts to try to change history, to alter history, and as Nathan said, teach future generations, basically, propagandist revisionist history.
Yeah, that's where we heading for sure. Um, Another Gen Sixer has been convicted. This has happened like I think 3, 4, 5 times at least. Of course, the January 6th for folks were issued a pardon by Donald Trump across the board. Everybody got a pardon. And here it is, yet another example. This just happened this week. A man was convicted of gun charges after arrest near Obama's home. And what was he doing near Obama's home? We can only imagine with a weapon. He was a Jan 6 defendant. It just makes me wonder what have this become commonplace now? It seems like this isn't even really a big story, the whole Jan 6 thing and then what they do afterward, which leads me to ask, I mean, what's the long-term ramifications for this? Will it just be separate news articles that come out? Is there some type of erosion of some kind of principle that's a good thing that we should be talking about? Or is this just another Trump crazy, you know,
No,
Friday?
this is Trump's.
Just
These
another day.
people, and I think Trump knows this. These are his militia. This is his militia. Okay, these are the people who, when they get the right wink and the right nod, will hit the streets. And if that means, and that probably may mean violently attacking Trump protesters, things like that. These are the guys that'll do it. And you might recall that one of the things Trump asked his generals in the first administration was, "Hey, look, there was some protests going on. He seriously asked him, can we shoot them in the leg? Can we do that?" Okay, so this is the mentality. Okay, and his reason, other than just revenge and everything, to let these guys out was they're there for him. These are the people who are going to fight for him, and in a very dangerous way.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I would say these
Mm.
are bad people. Maybe not everybody. Look, I will concede that everybody who was at the Capitol on that day is probably not the worst of the worst, but there were a lot of guys that were men and women that were a part of that event on January 6th who were bad people, and you see that they're unable to stay out of trouble even when they've been pardoned by the president. And again, it's like you said, what this guy was doing over on Obama's property. I mean, it wasn't anything good. I mean, he wasn't there to bring him a basket of muffins and welcome him to the neighborhood. I mean, you know what's up. And so it again just continues to show the bad judgment. Um, and I'm just, I think every time these headlines come out, people should be outraged because these are the folks that he has turned loose onto the streets. And I'm just waiting for one of these guys to do something. And I hope it's not true. I hope it doesn't happen. But unfortunately, I feel like it's just a matter of time before you see one of these guys do something serious on a larger scale that is going to really draw some headlines, and it really is going to be something that unfortunately we're going to regret that these folks who shouldn't even be out on the street are out because Trump wanted to make you know some kind of statement or play to the worst of the worst.
The other thing for me is I think that Trump is redesigning what it means to be president. Like it's clear to me that there's an appetite from the public that when somebody's elected president, we want to see them do big things, right? We want to see them do something. And I think this pardon thing, should be if there's a Democrat president, I think that president should do the same thing that Trump did only for people that might be, people who are persecuted um, um, for crimes from which that we like over policing or crimes. And there was a big in Trump and Biden did this to his credit. I think he released like it might have been it was a lot of people, but they were for like non-felony drug cases. People like that, Marilyn Mosby, folks like that should get a second. Trump and Biden have completely redesigned the whole pardon process, in my opinion. You know, people want to see you do a big splash. And so we'll see if that happens. Well, fellas, that's all I got. That's all I got. I appreciate you. And I appreciate you, Kevin. I didn't even know you was down there taking a vacay, man. I'm glad to see you,
Kevin,
man, bro. Thanks
I
for your
can get
time.
down there. You guys didn't have extra room down there? Extra spare room or something down there in, down in Myrtle Beach? Can't hear
Can't hear you.
He turned his mic
Can't
off.
hear you.
Well,
Your mic is off.
if you can hear me, I'll be down there tomorrow. I catch a plane about 1:15. I'll be there late afternoon. So look forward. We'll go ahead and get some shrimp and that kind of stuff.
Oh, you back,
I
Kevin?
appreciate the hospitality. I really do.
Hey, I was telling Phil, I'm lucky I got a place to lay my head down here, man. I might have to hitchhike back to Cincinnati. At the rate that I'm going. But yeah, sorry I had to join in late, man. I wish I could have got there from
All
the
good.
beginning. I
Hey.
actually probably should have been the way I was playing. I should have been here from the beginning. I'd have had more fun on here with you guys than I had those last 3 or 4 holes.
Listen, a lot of us, Kevin, we kind of live vicariously through you. Okay, so maybe if you're still around there Tuesday, do it poolside so we can at least kind of get a sense of what it's like, what that kind of life is like.
Phil, you listen. You already know your lifestyles are the rich and famous already, man. We know what the deal is with you.
Hey,
But
Napoleon,
I'll be back. I'll be back in the Natty on Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Napoleon, what do you have going on, man? Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Napoleon Solo Shots on Instagram. I also have a Facebook page and then some different websites. If you Google me, you find a lot of different stuff. Like I said earlier, I just came back from Benin in Africa, and that was like we were in the big city called Cotonou. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but man, those people, when you talk about warmth and hospitality and respect, and they just, they may not have, everybody may not have a whole lot materially. I mean, some people are comfortable, but they have, it's like the poem from Maya Angelou when she says something about, I walk like I have diamonds in the heels of my shoes or something like that. That's how those people, that's how they walk. That's how they carry themselves. And not because they're looking down, but because the way they welcome people into the room. When you arrive, they say, good arrival in French, like bon arrivé. Like they're so welcoming and warm. It's just rich culturally. So we were there performing a show about Toussaint Louverture for the Institut Français was hosting us there. Next concert I have coming up is in Austria, where I'll do workshops in Austria, then I'll come back and do a concert here in France. So yeah, staying busy.
Glad to hear it, man. We got to catch up, bro.
Yeah.
To Rebecca, who's not with us, thank you for your time, Rebecca. I appreciate you,
Yeah,
Phil.
and let me just say, if you disagreed with Rebecca, Napoleon, just wait till you meet Kevin Gordon, okay?
Okay.
Okay. You'll say she's a woman of the people compared to him. Just say.
Oh wow. Okay.
Oh yeah.
I've met a few people that I've disagreed with, and we came out on the other side all right.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I believe that. For your time today, everybody, and to the audience,
Yes.
thanks for being here. Have a great weekend, and we'll catch you again next week on Tuesday and Friday at 1 p.m.
Yes. Nice to meet you, Mr. Aldridge, Mr. Hemlich.
Take it easy, bro.
Peace.